Here at the Tory party conference in Manchester, the government appears to have lost control of the messaging on high-speed rail to Manchester. We're live from the Tory party conference in Manchester, where the question on everyone's lips is, what's going on with HS2?
Have you got any idea what's happening on HS2?
What I do know is Jeremy's just delivered a stonking speech that conference is very happy with.
Here for the government is Treasury Minister Gareth Davis. Also at conference today, the former PM Liz Truss, whose government this time a year ago was imploding, is urging her successor to cut the highest tax burden we've had for 70 years. We'll talk to a Tory MP who agrees with her. And as Tory members tell me they are quietly optimistic about Conservative chances at the next election, we'll chew things over with our panel. Justine Greening, a former Cabinet Minister who signed off on HS2, Robert Colville, one of the authors of the Tories' 2019 manifesto, and Alita Adu of The Guardian. Good evening. The optics of the governing party holding its annual conference in the city where a high-speed line is supposed to reach, but appears like it might not now, isn't great. Government ministers today have been keen to focus on the success they are having in bringing inflation down. And each time HS2 is mentioned, they say, we've got spades in the ground. Outside the conference hall, the Conservative Mayor of the West Midlands, Andy Street, gave an impromptu press conference. He was quietly furious. His message? The PM should not give up on HS2 from Birmingham to Manchester, but instead should radically rethink how we build it and embrace, as he put it, the private sector. Nick, what's happening?
Well, Victoria, it does look very much like we are going to be saying farewell to that second leg of HS2. That, of course, is the line from Birmingham to Manchester. And it looks like we may well be seeing that as soon as Wednesday, when, of course, Rishi Sunak will be delivering his main speech to this conference here in Manchester. Now, before we look at that move, let us look at what Downing Street has been saying. What they're saying tonight is what they've been saying all day since these reports first emerged. And they are saying these reports are incorrect. No final decisions have been taken on phase 2 of HS2. And that message was echoed to me when I caught up earlier with Mel Stride, the Work and Pension Secretary, who is, of course, very close to Rishi Sunak.
Oh, hello.
Hello, we're
Yes.
in Manchester.
We are.
HS2's second leg. Not going to happen, is it?
Well, we haven't made any announcements. Not going to comment on HS2. I've just heard a brilliant speech by the Chancellor of the Exchequer about how we're going to grow the economy. I'm going to give him a speech in a minute about...
Tory, in the light of that, why are we reporting on this? Well, I think that number 10 statement is designed to say this is not a done deal now, because it hasn't had cabinet sign-off, but I think we can expect that. And just to give you a flavour here, I caught up with a minister in a department who would know what's going on, and they adopted a very Francis Urquhart sort of House of Cards voice. And this minister said to me, Nicholas, you might say it will all happen on Wednesday. And then talking to another source who would be pretty close to the decision-making, and they gave me a flavour of what the Prime Minister is likely to say. And what they're saying is they think it'll be a very positive message, a very upbeat message about transport. The Prime Minister will say, well, look, we can now reallocate resources to roads. We can reallocate them to buses and have an impact right now rather than waiting for years and decades down the line, and not giving up on rail. It may well be we'll hear favourable comments about the Northern Powerhouse Rail. That is the rail line that is meant to be going from Leeds to Liverpool.
Thank you. Well, it was around lunchtime when reports began circulating that the Prime Minister had made up his mind on HS2, and Joe headed out into conference.
Any idea what's happening on HS2, Kemi? Do you know if a decision has been made on the northern leg? Does anyone know? Party conferences are supposed to ooze authority. Hello, Mr. Cleverly. Have you heard the HS2 news? Is it right to scrap the northern leg?
I haven't, but I've got to go to my next meeting.
Politicians projecting power. Have you got any idea what's happening on HS2?
What I do know is Jeremy's just delivered a stonking speech that conference is very happy with.
But after new reports the PM had been decisive in scrapping the northern leg of HS2, his cabinet ministers didn't seem sure. Has the decision been made on HS2, Mr Hands?
We have to wait and see.
Do you think it would be positive if the northern leg was scrapped?
Well, we'll just have to wait and see. This are all matters being discussed by the government and by ministers in the usual way, and an announcement will be made at the right time.
A lot of uncertainty, isn't there? Downing Street insisted no decision had been made. Hi, Hugh. Joe Pike from BBC. What's happening to HS2? And the Minister for HS2 didn't want to chat. Will you stay in your job if the northern leg of HS2 is scrapped?
I'm very happy in my job and I enjoy most aspects of it, apart from this sort of...
But you can't confirm a decision's been made?
So, look, it's speculation. No announcement has been made, and so therefore I can't comment on something that hasn't been announced.
Yeah, of course, I can do it FaceTime.
Across the conference centre, the man leading the campaign against this move was seething.
Thanks again. Bye.
What do you make of this?
I'm really disappointed, Joe. I'm disappointed for the country. I'm disappointed for people and communities here in the north of England. We look like we're going to lose HS2 to Birmingham, but we're also likely to lose Northern Powerhouse Rail. So that's the line from Liverpool and Warrington across to Leeds and the North East. So you've got to look back to this Prime Minister's commitments. He said to me, when I first met him actually at this Tory conference, when he was a backbencher, that his mission in politics was to deliver that new line across the Pennines. And he will be the Prime Minister that destroys it, not just for this generation, but for many generations to come, and puts back the cause of levelling up, of genuinely closing the north-south divide for 100 years.
But there are many here, including some representing the north, who think Rishi Sunak is on the right track. Hey, Ben.
Yeah? Is it now officially scrapped, is it?
We don't know, but
Okay.
you have strong opinions on it.
On HS2, yeah, absolutely. I think HS2 is a white elephant. I think that money could be better spent on other things. And a project that was originally supposed to cost £32 billion is now projected to cost £180 billion. And people that I represent across the north of England as well would suggest that could probably be better spent on other priorities that make a bit better difference to their lives.
The last few hours here have seemed chaotic, confusing as much for ministers as for the rest of us. Now, some polls suggest HS2 isn't hugely popular, especially when you take into account the overspend. But the rampant speculation about this decision, especially considering how it affects this city, has made the Tory party conference look anything but calm and controlled. If this is the end of the line for HS2's northern leg, the government is likely to spend the money saved on roads and bus networks. And even at the station that would have benefited, opinions are mixed. What do you make of it?
It's a waste of money, you know. We can do, for better transport than doing that.
But you're not local, are you?
No, I'm from Newcastle, and it's not coming up there, so...
It's appalling. Where's the money going? Where is it going? We pay tax, don't we, in this country? Rishi Sunak's not very transparent, though, is he?
You think it should be built?
I do, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a shame, really. Brings trade to the area, doesn't it? It's tourism, trade.
Today's uncertainty led to impromptu press conferences by the Conservative Mayor of the West Midlands and the Labour Mayor of Greater Manchester.
It just makes me despair about politics in this country, to be honest. It's dysfunctional. There's no proper way of doing things anymore. Things are kind of tossed out on social media when you would think, wouldn't you, that the leaders of a city region like this should be told about what's going on. It's no way to run a country. It's no way to run a government. Long-term decisions for a brighter future, honestly, don't make me laugh. If they stand in front of that slogan anymore, having pulled the plug on our rail infrastructure, I just think the north of England will just say, well, you could just tear that up.
The hold-up on Rishi Sunak's HS2 decision risks derailing his first and possibly last conference as Conservative leader. Weary West Coast travellers may yet again experience a long delay, followed by cancellation.
Let's talk now to Gareth Davis, who is here on behalf of the government. He is the Exchequer Secretary to the Treasury. Good evening to you. It's no way to treat the north of England, is it?
Well, look, we've invested, I think, £33 billion in the transportation network of the north of England. We've
just tell them the truth.
Well, I'm telling you the truth. It's £33 billion of investment in the transport network of the north of England, and it's not just about transportation levelling up. It's about funding our towns and the City of Manchester and other cities in the north of England, which are powering and attracting business investment. That is what is critical to powering up the north of England.
Let's not waste your time or our viewers' time on speculation. Let's talk about what we do know. We do know the costs are totally out of control because the Chancellor said so. Those are his words. The government's in charge of HS2. Why haven't you controlled the costs?
So I think whenever you have a major infrastructure project, you're going to see significant cost outlay. We knew it was going to be an expensive project right at the outset. What's happened over the years is those costs have become significantly higher than
I'm asking why you haven't controlled.
Well, we've had an organisation in HS2 Limited who've been in charge of HS2, and we've had, as you know, I don't need to tell you, different administrations over the years.
All Conservative governments.
But I think it's quite important that we stress to your viewers tonight that when we're dealing with taxpayer money, it's right that we review how that money's been spent and whether projects still offer value for money. Now, no decision has been taken. I've been informed.
I mean, you don't
just
expect
as you
us
have,
to believe that at this point, do you?
Well, I'm going on what you've got on, which is the very clear statement from Number 10, which said that they don't recognise the media speculation and a decision has not been taken.
You say it's down to HS2 Limited, but day to day, the government's interests, i.e. taxpayer interests, in HS2 are handled by officials in the Department for Transport. And every single month, the Transport Secretary gets a monthly report from HS2 Limited, which includes the actual cost and the anticipated final cost compared to the baseline and the budget. So one of the conclusions must be that costs are out of control because you have let them get out of control.
I think there's different factors to consider when you're looking at a major infrastructure project, not least supply chain costs, and we know that inflation has been significantly higher over the last, certainly over the last year, and that is a contributing factor without a doubt. If you speak to anybody in construction, you will hear that material costs alone have a significant factor. We've also had, labour factors as well. So it's not as simple as you are suggesting. There are lots of factors. It is a major, complicated project that needs reviewing on a continual basis for value for money. And British taxpayers should expect that.
Absolutely. I'm not suggesting it's simple. What I'm suggesting is Rishi Sunak, for example, was the Chancellor from February 2020. That was 3 years ago. Every single month, someone in government looks at these costs. You've allowed it to get to the point at which you're about to scrap it, it would appear. Rishi Sunak's fingerprints are all over this.
Well, no decision has been taken. We don't recognise the reports in the media, and we would just stress that levelling up the north of England is more than about transport. It's more than about rail. People use buses. People have different modes of transportation, and so I understand why you want to talk about HS2 tonight, but here at the conference we have actually been talking about lots of other things, not least the number one challenge that we have in the economy, which is bringing down inflation, making sure we can grow our economy and standing up for the interests of the British people.
When someone like Andy Street, a Conservative mayor of the West Midlands, described today as the poster boy of levelling up, says, if you tell the international investment community you are going to do something, you bloody well have to stick to your word. Aren't you worried by that reaction?
Well, I have tremendous respect for Andy Street, who is a fantastic mayor of the West Midlands. But as your piece showed, there are differing views on this major infrastructure project. You had Ben Houchin on there offering a different view. But what we are doing is ensuring that we assess these projects for value for money at every step of the way, and that's what's going on at the moment.
You're increasing the minimum wage to £11. At the same time, you're going to change the way sanctions work on some of those in receipt of benefits to get them to find a job more quickly. The evidence suggests that sanctions don't work. And let me quote from the DWP's own report on sanctions published this year. A sanction leads the average claimant to exit less quickly into PAYE earnings and to earn less upon exiting. In other words, sanctions lead to people taking longer to get a job, and when they do, they earn less.
So this is a piece of work that Treasury have ongoing with DWP. As the Chancellor said, this is under review and we're looking at that very, very carefully.
Do you accept that sanctions don't achieve.
But I haven't seen the detailed report that you're referring to. I'm very happy to read it.
I've got it for you.
That will be part.
You can have my copy.
Thank you very much. But that is part of the review that will be going on. But the main point here is that we want to support workers, and we want to ensure that we continue to have a very strong employment market. We've got record levels of unemployment, we've got high levels of payroll, but there are elements to our employment market, jobs market, where there are things that we need to tackle. Long-term sickness is one, and we want to ensure that when people can work, they do work. Okay. And then when they do work, we want to support them with a pay rise through the increase that the Chancellor announced today on the national living wage, which we have said we will wait for the recommendations of the pay body that we look at, but we will increase that to at least £11, which ensures that we send a message to the British public that we value work and they should too.
I want to ask you something about something Mark Harper said today, your colleague, the Transport Secretary. He said this in his speech. It was about 15-minute cities. He said, "What is sinister and what we shouldn't tolerate is the idea that local councils can decide how often you go to the shops." Which council is proposing that they will decide how often people can go to the shops?
I'm afraid I missed that speech. I'll have to look into why he said that and what the example is.
Please do.
I'm going to have to go back to you on that.
We've searched and we cannot find a council that's proposing that. After 13 years in power, I appreciate you were only elected in 2019, but the Conservatives have been in power since 2010. What would you do with another 5 years?
I think we've set out already today at the conference that we have been a government who has overseen an inheritance when it comes to the economy of no money left. We've had a situation where we've faced two major global shocks in a pandemic and an energy crisis, and we had the British public's back. We intervened significantly in both of those crises in particular.
That's the past.
And that is the past, but that is our track record. I'm coming to
vision?
that. But based on that, we've shown that we can govern. And so as we look forward, we have.
Give me some examples.
During the pandemic, the furlough scheme, which was implemented by this Prime Minister as Chancellor, ensured that we grew, one of the fastest to grow out of the pandemic compared to a lot of our international peers. We've seen this year alone that the IMF, the OBR, the Bank of England have all upgraded their growth estimates for the United Kingdom, and that's in large part because of the interventions that we made through that global pandemic.
And it's a large part why we've got the highest tax burden now for 70 years.
So I think your viewers would say that it was right that we stepped in to support businesses and families and individuals during that very uncertain period of the global pandemic, but also through the energy spike. You know, we spent £94 billion, 40 billion last year, effectively paying 50% of people's energy bills when wholesale gas prices spiked. So government's there to protect people during really meaningful global shocks, and we've had two of them in the last 3 years, all while I've been a new Member of Parliament. But going forward, we do want to look to the future, and that's why we've outlined that once we've got a control of inflation, we can start to grow our economy. And looking at the technologies of the future, we've got an AI summit coming up soon. We've been very clear we want the UK to be the Silicon Valley of this part of the world, and I am absolutely confident that by investing in new technology and the workforce of the future, we can grow our economy long into the future and ensure that we maintain the strong employment track record that we've built up.
If you're someone who wants lower taxes, if you're someone who wants lower net migration, both at record levels after 13 years of Conservatives in power, why on earth would you vote Conservative?
Because we've been very clear we want to bring down taxes, but we're not going to do that.
Everybody wants to bring down taxes.
I'm not sure they do.
You've got to put your money where your mouth is.
I'm not sure that's true. If you look at the opposition, they've made significant commitments.
But just because you say you want to bring down taxes doesn't make it happen. Look at your record.
Yeah.
Highest tax burden in peacetime.
It is because we've intervened during a global pandemic and the energy crisis, but we have also brought 3 million people out of paying any tax at all by increasing the threshold. So, you know, you can earn £1,000 in this country without paying any tax. We also have the lowest corporation tax in the G7. We have one of the most generous capital allowances tax systems in the OECD. So when we can, we will bring taxes down, but we have to maintain that reputation for responsible finances. And that's what differentiates the Conservative Party from our opposition, who are not.
It was only a year ago that a Conservative Prime Minister was imploding after that mini-budget of billions and billions of unfunded tax cuts. You don't think people have forgotten that, do you?
I think people are looking at what we are doing now and what we're going to do in the future, and I think I have every confidence, as do many people around this conference, that people will recognise that we stepped in the most dark period of our country in years, and we have plans and a vision for the future that can inspire many people.
Thank you very much, Mr Davis. Thank you for being with us. Thank you. Well, you had to move away from the main conference hall here to get where the action of the day was. There were queues to get into a packed Fringe event by former Prime Minister Liz Truss earlier, a little more than a year, as we were just saying to Mr Davis, after that mini-budget spooked the economic markets and led to her resignation. In her only public appearance at this conference, Ms Truss called for tax cuts, a new house building programme and the return of fracking. Here's Nick.
In the shadow of a Manchester icon, the Conservatives gather. Calmer than last year when the Liz Truss premiership started to implode. A perfect cue in the eyes of some for a return to the limelight of an unapologetic ex-Prime Minister. Admirers, like-minded parliamentarians, all rallying for low taxes and deregulating the economy.
We know that when businesses are able to keep more of those funds...
And for this former Prime Minister, not going quietly.
Let's be prepared to make Conservative arguments again, even if it's unpopular, even if it's difficult. I want everybody in this room to unleash their inner Conservative. And finally, my friends, let's make Britain grow again. Thank you.
Adoration, but control.
Liz Truss, quite a turnout. Quite a turnout. Is this party going your way? Is it coming back your way? Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Oh, hello. How are you?
How are you?
Very well.
Quite a turnout.
Yeah, very good turnout, yes.
Do you think this party is coming back to the Liz Truss way, or maybe nevertheless the Liz Truss way?
I think the Conservative Party has always believed in low taxation and low regulation. And actually that's exactly what the Prime Minister is doing as well, that he's cutting green regulation, he's cutting regulation on the motorist. So this is what you would expect at a Conservative event.
And is today about helping Rishi Sunak win the election?
I want us to win the election, Nick. I mean, you know exactly what I'm going to say on this. I don't want to see a Labour government. I'm a Conservative and I want to see us coming together to win the election. And you've just heard me speak about the high rate of taxation. That will only go up under a Labour government, and I don't want to see
But you can
that
anticipate my next point, or is it about laying the grounds for the next Conservative leadership contest with
Absolutely
maybe you
not.
there?
I want to win. I want us to win the next general election.
I mean, the queue is just extraordinary. And that's because she's talking the language of tax cuts. And don't forget, these are the people that voted for her to become leader. You know, and without them being asked again, she was removed. So you can see there's a slight sense of anger here too.
But not universal acclaim.
Attendance here.
I'm afraid I was.
What do you think?
I think it's dreadful. I really do. Please get that. So many people spoke are failed politicians. They have been a failure for this country.
An unlikely pairing, the man Liz Truss appointed as Chancellor in the last throw of the dice to save her premiership. That didn't work, but Jeremy Hunt kept his job and is now in the sights of Truss supporters, a Chancellor refusing to cut taxes. But today, some Truss language.
So to all the pessimists and declinists who've been talking us down, we say this: don't bet against Britain. It's been tried before and it never works.
It was a tale of two conferences today, a polite but not exactly rapturous reception for the Chancellor on the main conference stage. But down there in the conference hotel, it was packed to the rafters for Liz Truss. So we had the cautious Chancellor echoing the approach of the boss, and Liz Truss, she wants to take risks. We've seen that debate before, and perhaps we'll see it again as this party debates its future.
The symbol of an industrial giant,
the Manchester Bee casting an eye as ghosts of the past attempt to shape the future.
Let's talk to Conservative MP Danny Kruger, who is on the right of the party and co-chair of a group called the New Conservatives. And you are sympathetic to Liz Truss's call for tax cuts, correct?
Yes, I am. I'm not sure I'd go along with all of the proposals that she made today, but her essential diagnosis, I think, is the right one. We need to stimulate the economy. We need to get growth. We need to take on the chronic productivity challenge that has bedeviled our economy now for well over a decade. I was struck by what Gareth Davis, my colleague, who I thought was very good speaking to you just now about the challenges the government is facing, but he was talking about beating inflation and then growing the economy. I think we need to start growing the economy urgently, and that's part of the answer to the inflation challenge.
If you want tax cuts, the lesson of a year ago is you've got to show how you are going to pay for
it. I think that's absolutely
right.
So
otherwise you end up wrecking confidence in the UK economy, as we saw a year ago. So how would you pay for tax cuts right now then?
Well, I think it's fair to say we have very little fiscal room at the moment. I'd like to see some courage and boldness in the autumn statement. The New Conservatives are putting out a plan in the morning tomorrow, which suggests that what we're arguing for is raising the threshold on VAT to support small businesses, to help people to take on more workers and to grow their small and medium-sized businesses. We think there should be support for families as well, and the self-employed. Right. All of these things can be funded through improvements in the way that government works. There's significant...
As simple as that?
Well, we're talking
You've had 13 years to make those efficiency savings.
Well, and actually, in recent years, there have been significant efficiency savings. £3 billion was saved by Jacob Rees-Mogg when he was in the Government Efficiency Office.
But you still think there's more fat to trim?
I'm afraid to say there's a huge waste in the public sector, and we can improve outcomes for citizens if we improve the efficiency of the system. But we can also grow the economy by targeted tax cuts.
Don't you think it's easier to say than do? After all, you have had 13 years to do that.
Well, I think that's totally fair enough, but ultimately government does have to do. It has to make some decisions. We're encouraging Jeremy in the autumn statement to make some decisions. I think they had to be quite limited, probably less than Liz would like. But I think we can start taking some steps now that will generate growth and will generate improvements in tax receipts over time.
Let me just see if you agree with this, and you alluded to it a moment or two ago. The Chief Secretary to the Treasury, John Glenn, said today, you can't simultaneously stimulate growth and bear down on inflation. Is he right?
Well, it depends what the measures you use are. So I would favour supply-side reforms that actually boost well, but also through tax reform.
Oh,
so if we raise the threshold on VAT, we get more people working, we increase the incomes that people are receiving, we improve the productive capacity of our economy, we get more people making stuff and doing stuff for each other. So we can actually grow the economy by reducing taxation, and that will have its effect on inflation too. But I think we need to recognise there is not some huge difference of opinion between those of us calling for tax cuts now and the government. I think we all recognise the reality of the situation. We're just saying we think we can go a little further, and we do need to be deliberate about stimulating the productive capacity of the economy so that we can grow incomes for ordinary people, and we can go into the next election with taxes on the way down.
And are you genuinely saying to your constituents you would vote against the autumn statement if there was any kind of tax-raising stuff in there?
Well, no, I think there might need to be some taxes might need to go up.
So what is your pledge to your
our pledge is that we should not support any overall increase in the tax burden. The tax burden is now at its highest in peacetime history. It's absolutely unthinkable that we should be raising the overall taxation of the country. If some taxes need to go up, they need to be balanced by tax reductions in other areas. So I don't think we should be raising the overall tax burden on the country. We need to be reducing it.
And are you sympathetic? You heard Gareth Davis saying it. One of the reasons the government argues that the tax burden is so high is because they spent billions on furlough through the pandemic.
I am very sympathetic. I mean, and you mentioned immigration too. There are reasons why we have record levels of migration. Events happen, global events happen, and the government has responded in many ways very well, I think. But fundamentally, we're coming through the energy crisis. We don't need to be bringing in so many migrants. We need to take deliberate action now, well ahead of the election, to show that, because you're right, words aren't good enough. We can't start saying this stuff in a year's time. We need to start doing it now.
Today, you said, the penny is dropping among people in Westminster that the government doesn't run the government. What on earth are you talking about?
I was at an event talking about the growth of the quango state, and I'm afraid we're talking about the tax burden on our country. It is the fact that over the last 20 years, since the Blair government particularly, the great proliferation of agencies at arm's length from the government, not properly accountable to ministers, taking decisions on behalf of the public. And the fact is that ministers, for all their good intentions and all their efforts, often are unable to affect the outcomes that they themselves believe in. And Tony Blair talks about this, of course, when he left office. It's something that I'm afraid to say that we haven't yet corrected in government.
You are literally the government. You are literally
well, this is why,
the
and actually, a point I made at this event is that you're totally right, and it's absolutely the right challenge, because the public hate it when we say this. I mean, I'm being honest about this. The fact is that the government doesn't have as much power as it wants to. The public can't understand and will not accept this. They expect us to take control of the levers of the state.
Give me an example.
They really, well, I mean, something I deal with a lot in my constituency, Natural England is a quango set up by the government that effectively oversees government policy towards the environment. DEFRA, the government department, has to defer to this quango. The quango itself defers to all sorts of NGOs out in the environmental lobby. So there's a whole network of institutions, some of them in the States, some of them outside, some of them charitable, that actually are determining policy.
You could get rid of
and
them,
you're absolutely right.
The law,
well,
you could do whatever.
So that is what the argument I'm making. We need to take very deliberate action to make sure the government is the government.
Thank you very much for being with us. Thank you. Danny Kruger. So today was dominated by talk about tax and HS2. Tomorrow, in the main hall, there will be speeches from Steve Barclay on the NHS, against a background of doctor strikes, of course, Michael Gove, Michelle Donnellan, who will be live on the programme tomorrow night, and in the afternoon, it's the Justice Secretary, Alex Chalk, and the woman some are tipping as a future leader, Home Secretary Suella Braverman. Joining me to chew over today in conference, Justine Greening, who was in Cabinet from 2011 to 2018, Robert Colville, who co-wrote the 2019 Conservative Manifesto, and hopefully political correspondent at The Guardian, Alita Adu, in just a moment. Right, day one, day two, I've forgotten what day we're on, day two.
Day two.
How would you assess it?
Well, I'm really sorry. The narrative in Newsnight has been, you know, everyone is talking about HS2, everyone is talking about Liz Truss, and actually, I sort of didn't get that. I think everyone is.
What's your
the mood, like compared with not just last year, which was obviously completely crazy, but in the last few years, actually, the mood in the conference I think is fairly calm, and you know, people are getting on with, you know, it's not full of sort of turmoil and sort of roiling rows and people, you know, plotting against the government. I mean, yes, obviously there was a crowd for Liz Truss, but you always have that. I mean, if you remember the sort of Mogmentum a few years ago, which was the sort of Jacob Rees-Mogg mania. I mean, there were, you know, this is Conservative Party conference. There are always quite a lot of right-wing tax-cutting people here.
Sure. I mean, I spoke to quite a few delegates today. They were saying they were quietly optimistic about chances at the general election. They felt positive. They said after seeing Jeremy Hunt speak. What's your assessment?
I think to the outside world, it does feel like there are lots of different factions within the Conservative Party setting out what can seem like quite different stalls. Whereas what people actually want to see, and I think what activists really want to see, is a much more optimistic vision for where the party now wants to take Britain. This sense that we've come out of COVID, but actually we need to redesign Britain to be much fairer in the future, particularly on access to opportunity than it's been in the past. And I think...
I mean, I did ask Gareth Davies, what is the vision? What do you want another 5 years for? He talked about growth. Everybody does. He talked about AI, the tech sector. I mean, is that the kind of vision you're thinking of, or does it need to be more?
It's got to be much, much more, because when people get told about growth, it's sort of an economic concept. It's hard to necessarily think, what does this mean for our lives? And I think it's got to be growth with a purpose, and that purpose has to be fairer access to opportunity. That means more people get on in their lives. And so when we listen to some of the debates on quangos, on tax, it's all very policy heavy. But I think for people out there trying to get a sense of what it's going to mean for them, it's quite a sterile debate, actually.
Yeah, so the slogan of the conference is long-term decisions for a brighter future. So far, we've had decisions. Some of them have been long-term, but the brighter future bit hasn't been there as much. There's been a lot of stuff about, you know, we're going to stop this, we're going to axe this, we're going to ban this, we're going to prevent people doing this. There hasn't been the sort of positive, uplifting, forward-looking things, which you hope and imagine would come in Rishi Sunak's concluding speech on Wednesday. But I thought the Chancellor's speech today was actually quite interesting, because the argument you were just having about tax and, you know, all the other ones, actually the Chancellor's making sort of quite a grown-up argument, which is that if we want to cut taxes, we do have to restrain the growth of the state. We have to stop the civil service growing by an estimated 40,000 people over the next few years and try and wind it back to 2019 levels. We have to improve the abysmal levels of public sector productivity, for example, by making greater use of AI and things like that. I mean...
And all of that is true, because you look at productivity from 2008, 2009 onwards, there has been poor productivity every single year.
Especially poor productivity in the public sector.
Sure. And of course then voters say, OK, that may or may not be the case, but there have been 13 years for the government to sort that out.
Yes, but there's also been, pandemics and inflationary crises and wars in Ukraine and lots of other things which have knocked people off their...
Yeah, but only in the last 4 years or so.
But there's a bigger issue here, isn't there, which is it's lives off track that cost public finances more money than lives that are on track and contributing. And therefore, what we need to do is not sort of almost try and rework the existing cake in its existing size. It's about actually fundamentally rewiring Britain so more people can succeed. And that is how you will drive more tax revenue. That's how you will probably have better, lower cost public services. And so I think this shave a bit of tax here and shave a bit of public services there, it's almost, for me, it's an old-fashioned political argument that misses the bigger picture of the fact that actually too many people in this country cannot contribute, can't reach their potential, and that's what's holding us back. And the reason it's getting worse, Victoria, is because economies are increasingly driven by human capital as we get into the 21st century. That's why AI matters too. And so if you're a country that has stagnant social mobility, the worst in 50 years, as the IFS said recently, you are more at a disadvantage economically than other economies. And that's why, for us, weak social mobility is the biggest economic challenge Britain faces.
Alita Adu, welcome to you from The Guardian. What's your assessment of day 2 of this conference?
It's been quite embarrassing for the Prime Minister, I'd say, so far. The mood amongst Conservative activists is very low. Many Conservative MPs across all sides are not feeling this sort of energy and the drive we saw at the last party conferences. And it's because ultimately many of them do not feel like there is any...
sorry, the last party conference was like the government imploded.
The government imploded.
There was an energy. It's not necessarily the energy that
well, quite.
The Prime Minister at the time would have wanted to see.
But we've definitely seen so far it's been ultimately like a leadership contest already beginning to brew. We've got the likes of Suella Braverman and her allies essentially texting each other during the Chancellor's speech, for example, openly plotting essentially to sort of get people on side, people to start, getting her leadership race on the move. But also we've got a number of MPs who are just disappointed at the Prime Minister's handling of HS2. Many of them feel as though it's the wrong time to be for this to have come out. Obviously, he didn't want it to. But they are questioning. We've got London MPs also annoyed that it's not going all the way down. We've got Northern MPs who feel as though they've been let down. Where is the vision, really?
You signed off on HS2, but there are plenty of Conservative MPs. There are plenty of people around the country. We heard them in the pieces from Joe earlier, who are absolutely not fans of HS2, think it's a complete waste of money.
And I've always disagreed with that. I think it's crucial if you're going to actually be able to have Britain get connected up. We've got a motorway system that's a national one. It makes sense to have a high-speed rail system that's a national one as well. And I think almost the worst-case scenario to end up in is to not have a national railway system, and then even to have that existing leg that will be done, not actually get to its destination in London.
Where are you on this? And what's happened to the messaging? How have they lost control?
HS2 has been a disaster from almost start to finish. It was approved for political reasons. It was all sorts of politicised decisions were made about it. Very, very expensive tunnelling under the lovely leafy constituencies of Tory voters.
And Conservative.
It was approved to start because the government wasn't willing to have the fight on Heathrow expansion. It thought that MPs in constituencies like Justine would have...
I don't recognise that as I was there at the time, and it wasn't political. It was about the fact that the West Coast Main Line talking to the rail industry. The West Coast Main Line was basically full.
Yeah, there was a case for a new rail line. It was grotesquely overspec'd. They had a review in 2019 where the chairman was in favour of HS2, the deputy chairman was against HS2, the deputy chairman resigned and wrote his own report saying this is all nonsense.
But the government continued.
We have spent so much money on this thing. That, you should have cut it off at any point in the last decade. But you've got so far. Ending up with a train that runs from Acton to, well, from Wormwood Scrubs to Birmingham is not. It's probably not ideal. So I do think there is a case for just.
Whose responsibility is that? Do you think?
Well, partly it's actually about the pandemic and inflation. I mean, construction costs have gone. For all I've said before, so far, construction costs have gone absolutely through the roof of every form of construction, but especially rail construction.
When we get the decision, whenever it may be, it will put pressure on Labour to come up with an answer to the question that they are going to be asked, which is, what would you do with the Birmingham to Manchester leg? What's their strategy going to be?
And they're saying they will continue and essentially rebuild the entire project as it was planned.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, it depends who you talk to. I spoke to Darren Jones, Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, last Sunday, and he said, we need to look at the books, we need to look at the figures.
Louise Hay, 3 months ago, before the reshuffle, was very committed to the project. Obviously, we've seen message discipline, continue to get very strict with the party as the months continue to go by. So, to be honest, it'll be interesting to see if we get any sort of actual response on policy from Labour at conference next week. But the pressure will certainly be on Keir Starmer to deliver that for people.
Thank you very much. Alita Adu, thank you for being with us from The Guardian. Robert Colville, thank you very much. And Justine Greening, thanks for being with us. Let's have a quick look at some of tomorrow's front pages then. The Daily Mail. Britain is the best country to be black in, says Kemi. Front page of The Times. The PM brings the axe down on HS2 in the north. The Guardian. Sunak accused of cancelling the future with the climb down over HS2. And that's it. That's all I've got. That is it from us tonight. We're back from here tomorrow and maybe we'll have an HS2 decision by then. Who knows? Good night.